Okay, we're up to 20, so I think that'll probably be about the number. So thank you for that. Let's have a look. Share the screen again. Right, okay, welcome everybody. As we've said, my name's Chris Freeman. I work for Warwickshire and Solihull Community and Voluntary Action, known as CARVA. And just let somebody else in. And thank you for coming out staying at home, coming out for this webinar. So thank you very much for that. What is the potential benefits from tonight? Hopefully, you're going to go away with knowledge of how to recruit trustees with the right skills, experience, knowledge, and retain them as trustees. So that's hopefully the benefit of tonight. We want to try and make it interactive and participative, if I can say the word. There will be some presenting as well. So just in terms of housekeeping, we are recording the webinar for those people who couldn't make it tonight. I'd suggest in terms of confidentiality, try and anonymise any references if it's a topic that might be sensitive. The presentation and resources will be sent out. Just to make it easy, if you can raise your hand in the reactions if you have a question. We'll leave questions until after the presentation because I won't always see everybody. So if you can wait until the presentations are finished, then we'll go into a question and answer session. It's also helpful if you could put your name and organisation on your screen as well, if that's possible. So to kick us off, I'd like to split you up into breakout rooms. If you can introduce yourself quickly into that breakout room. Tell us who your charity is, and just have a discussion about what your experiences of trustee recruitment and the challenges that you face in terms of trustee recruitment. So it's just a kick-off activity to get us started. So to do that, I'll just have to stop sharing and put you into a breakout room. So we should go with 4 of those. And we'll go for 6 minutes on that. So 6 minutes on that, and then we'll come back and move forward. Welcome back. People start coming back. Are you there, Karen? Let's just see who's back. Yeah, everybody's back. Okay, thank you for that. Just share my screen again. And on the front slide. Okay. So thank you for that. Want to move on. So you've heard in your breakout rooms some of the issues and challenges in Solihull and Warwickshire. But what is the national picture? National Council of Voluntary Organisations, NCVO, have just published a new report called Understanding Trustee Recruitment and Retention Challenges. Nice, snappy title. That's based on surveys that have taken place in 2004. And they've published this report this week, I think. So what does the report tell us about the state of trustee recruitment and retention in 2024? Tells us that trustees' vacancies are a growing concern 79% of charities surveyed reported at least one vacancy, and 62% had two or more. Another key statistic is that 85% of those who surveyed said they were finding it difficult to recruit trustees. So what impact does that have on trustees like yourselves and people you know? These are the some of the impacts that the survey found has on trustees. Stress and anxiety was the second highest recorded impact of vacancies on the trustee board. The first 60% was that charities say board vacancies are preventing them from developing as an organisation. 4 in 10 said their vacancies are limiting their ability to follow good governance practices. Mm-hmm. And a third say vacancies are limiting their ability to make effective decisions. So many instances there in terms of impacting on the charity's ability and the trustee board to manage the charity in an effective and good practice way. And that, obviously that can have an impact ultimately on the beneficiaries that you serve. So what are we going to cover tonight to help reduce some of that potential impact? What we're going to cover is, in a moment, we're going to have a presentation from Lisa Carroll, LifeSpace CEO and Voluntary Action Coventry Chair. We're then going to have another discussion about engaging trustees and keeping them active. David Griffiths, the chair of the Nuneaton Arts and the Abbey Theatre in Nuneaton, will then give us a short presentation. We'll look at the trustee recruitment cycle and how Carver can help recruitment, and Karen will cover that. And then we'll look at additional resources that can help you going forward. So, without further ado, I'd like to pass on to Lisa.
Hello. Lovely to be here. I would say Chris collared me and said, could you do this? Somebody nominated you. And I went, oh, okay. I'm not sure how much I know, but happy to dip in. What I would say, my best advice that I was ever given was don't listen to advice, or at least listen to it and then choose how much of it you wish to hear, which I think is good advice. So if we all have different organizations and different needs. My experiences and those of the charities that I've worked within might be very different to yours. So take out the bits that you think would be relevant and ignore the rest. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, I thought I'd tell you a bit about me. I'm married to James. I met him. I used to be a press photographer for the Coventry Telegraph, and I photographed him for the paper. And it's been happy ever since. I also met my first cat when I photographed him for the paper too, and he was he'd been abandoned, and so I decided I couldn't pick up any more waifs and strays, so I should probably change career. I've got 3 children with James, and very much the age. I've got 1 left at primary and the other 2 at secondary, and between us we have 12 pets, which is just ridiculous. We did say that perhaps we could set up our own petting zoo as a sideline, but if you're interested in snakes, tarantulas, axolotls, geckos, you name it, we've probably got one. And a couple of Jack Russells called Eric and Ernie. So, but I have, if they're just shouting, apparently some of you that them. So I've worked. I left the newspapers and have been working in charities for 18 years, predominantly housing and youth charities, and always in the Midlands. For me, that the consistent is it's been about helping people to achieve their potential, and I'm very pleased to be at my current charity, which very much sits all of those. So I've been a trustee for 6 years. I've been a chair for the last 4. And yeah, like I say, I've worked with some great trustees and some who I would cross the road if I saw them. But there we go. And I think we've probably all had similar experiences at some point. Look, come and say hello, then leave. My youngest has just been dropped back home. Right. Sorry. Okay, so life space, many of you looking at the names on the list, I think a few of you we've been in touch at one point or another, but we are a one-to-one charity, a one-to-one mentoring charity for young people based in Stratford. We're covering Stratford, South and Mid Warwickshire, and slowly making that creep around the county. So if we're not there yet, we may well be at a later date. We also work with Stratford Youth Collective, and we deliver open access youth provision and community mentoring. If you're in Stratford, bear this in mind, from 11 and up, children can self-refer, or they can refer with a parent, and from 16 and up, they can self-refer. And it is entirely funded, free at point of need. And if you've got a young person in Stratford that's struggling, get in touch. So a little plug for them. We've been on a journey. I've been here for 18 months. We've launched a business plan on a page. We've reviewed all of our systems and policies and processes. We're about to launch a new but very top secret service next year. So watch this space for that. And it's our 21st birthday next year. So as a charity, that's a very impressive impact that we've been able to make over 2 decades. Everything we do at LifeSpace is built on 3 pillars: build confidence, reduce distress, and achieve more. So, like I say, take from this what is helpful and what isn't. But what we've learned, I've worked for or under or with 5 different trustee boards, and so this is a blend of everything that's come from that. When I started at LifeSpace, I wanted to understand what the trustees that we had could bring to the table. So I had one-to-ones with them outside of board, got to know a little bit about them, their passion, their drive. I asked 4 questions of everybody when I started at LifeSpace, and it was, what should we do more of? What should we do less of? What was their motivation for being involved? And where should we be in 5 years? And it really helped get a sense of the collective energy and the impact that we could make. I also then did a trustee skills matrix, and these are the things that I'm sure with a lot of us, they kind of make you groan inwardly and you think, I have no idea how to even start. I have sent a 1-pager draft one over to Chris and Karen and said, if you want to send it out with the slides afterwards, you're very welcome to Nick. But essentially, we looked at all of the skills we needed within the organisation, the obvious things like finance and governance, but things like marketing and comms, and then things that were specific to our charity. And I went out to trustees and I asked them to grade themselves from 0 to 5. 5 being, this is my top subject, I could talk about this all day. 0 being, to haven't got a clue, don't even ask. And everybody did the same. And from that, it became quite apparent then where we had particular skills and interests. We also asked them on that, actually, how do you think you can help? Which was really interesting, because until then, a couple of the trustees and the one-to-ones were saying, well, I've joined the board, but I don't really know what I've got. I don't know what my purpose is here. I'm not quite sure what I can do to add. I'm just sitting, I'm waiting. I haven't quite figured out how I can add value. And I think that's really interesting, because I've seen that a lot on different trustee boards. They come in, but then they don't really know why they're there. And that can be challenging in various reasons. So the skills matrix really worked for us. At the same time, like I say, we were doing a policy review. So we quickly moved the trustees into directorates, if you like. So they had a particular area of interest. We had a trustee with responsibility for governance and compliance, who was a lawyer. I have a trustee responsible for finance, and the same for safeguarding and other things. So they all had a remit. They knew what their purpose was on the board, and that was really helpful. because I then had a mandate that I could go to individual trustees for an offline conversation. So not everything had to go via, email talking chats that can last days and weeks, and nobody knows what was agreed in the end. And that's really helped us. I think the relationship, if your charity has a CEO, I know not all of the charities here do, but the relationship between chair and CEO needs to be a really positive one. And I've seen far too often in my charities and also those around me that when things really go wrong, it's when that relationship isn't right. So there has to be trust and there has to be honesty. And, I'm fortunate that where I'm CEO, I've got a chair that, if I say, I'm not sure I got that quite right, or I'm stuck, I know I'll get support. And in the same way, where I'm chair, the CEO says that she feels the same. And I think that's what you really need. I put a post up on LinkedIn yesterday that said a really good board holds you with one hand and pushes you with the other. And I think that relationship is the one that can do that. We've also learned the hard way in various charities that all that glistens isn't gold. So when somebody gets in touch and they say they want to be a trustee, it's often, particularly if we're short on trustees, the instinctive thing is to say, brilliant, great, we'll have you. And then you realise a little bit further down the line that perhaps they're not what you were hoping for and they've created more problems. So by looking at it on a skill basis rather than a bums on seats basis, it enables you to go, actually, this is the person we need and you're not the right fit. And maybe find something else for them within your organisation. But ultimately, trustees need to add value and make life easier, not make life more difficult. And yeah, we learned that one quite a hard way in one charity in particular. So build a trustee recruitment pack is my advice, and a trustee recruitment policy. I would be very happy to share our policy if anyone thinks that would be helpful. But it sets the expectations. And I know, I chatted to some of the other CEOs. We meet once a month, and I was chatting to some of them the other day, and they said some trustees think they're signing up to 2 hours a month or 2 hours every other month, and then they realise that actually it's a subcommittee and it's 2 evenings here and 2 evenings there, and they can't commit. Or others think they're going to run the charity and realise, actually, I've only got 2 hours every couple of months and that's not going to work for me either. So, set your expectations on what it is that you're looking for. And, in my experience, if that's clear from the beginning, it helps definitely with recruitment. It depends whether you're a membership organisation. I'm sure some of the people here are. If you're a membership organisation, you will be required to do an external recruitment process. But not all charities are that way. And my recommendation is to try and find a blend. It's great to have planned recruitment or open recruitment, but it's also really important to look at direct approach. So our policy builds in the ability for us to do both. We're not a membership organisation, so we don't have to have, well, Lifespace isn't a membership organisation, so we don't have to vote people in from our membership. VAC is, but we often find that we struggle to get people to stand up to become a trustee. So in our AGM for VAC, we have had agreement from the members in the room that we can seek external people based on skills. So the membership are giving us the mandate to allow us to go out and get the right people around the table rather than not putting anyone forward. But definitely that having a relationship with somebody really works. A few years ago, though, before I got here, Lifespace were having a bit of a transition time with trustees. So a lot of them had reached their allotted 9 years in our case. So they made a decision that they went to a recruitment firm and they ran a recruitment process, but appointed for skill set. And I was very fortunate, actually. I got here, they were all in post, and I couldn't have picked better myself. So very lucky with that. The other thing we've learned along the way in various charities is to invite people as an observer first before voting them on. In one case, actually, we had somebody, they appeared to tick all their boxes. We all seek young trustees. We all seek people from different backgrounds, and so a young person came through, and they looked on paper like they could be perfect. And in the interview we had a video interview beforehand. They were quite hard work. And so we kind of we shot from the hip and went, right, we're going to do a come as an observer. And I've never, ever done anything else since. This particular person came into the meeting, and you have the conversation with an observer and say that means these open, this closed. So for anyone not looking, ears open, mouth closed. He came in and asked for about 7 things to be added under AOB. He'd reread the board pack and had got a whole load of ideas on how we could improve things that were already decided in the previous meeting, and it kind of went from there. And at the end of that first meeting, he left, and the trustees around the table had a conversation, and we went, well, what do we feel? And we thought, well, we'll give him another one, and we'll see. Maybe it was just excitement, maybe it was nerves. And he came the next time and corrected the finance manager on her figures, and what it turned out to be that he hadn't understood rounding. So when you round up the decimal place to whole numbers. So he had gone through line by line and written £1.32 out here, 95p out here. So after that meeting, we had a long conversation again, and we said, actually that he'd got a load of really lovely qualities. But the ultimate question for us was he going to add value to our board and to our meetings, or not? And the consensus ultimately was that actually it might be a personal development for that individual, but it wouldn't have helped the charity do what it needed to do. So we let him down gently. We pointed in the direction of a couple of other organisations where the trustees there were less strategic, more hands-on, but he wasn't the right fit for us. And had in times gone by, we'd have taken him on and then had to struggle to ease him back out again. And so definitely, I would recommend bring them in as an observer. That was a lot of wittering, and I apologise. But then. Kudos to Steve Ullman. If you're on LinkedIn, search for Steve Ullman and follow him. He's a consultant, works with a lot of charities. He was previously a CEO, and he wrote and periodically shares again his post around tricky trustees you could meet in charities. And they're brilliant. It was really, really funny. I've only just given you the headlines, but under each one there's a paragraph, and it's absolutely true. I think we have all come across a negative Nigel, and Ollie the Ostrich, Check It Charlie, Barry the Bigot, Silent Susie, and Rose Tinted Rosie. So yeah, I'll leave that one there. But I definitely recommend you hunt out Steve Ullman. It's good for a laugh, and very good if you're feeling isolated, because there are a lot of other charities, CEOs and trustees who come on there and go, oh, finally somebody sees it from our point of view. So definitely hunt him out. And then that's it for me. So I've popped on my email and LinkedIn. You're very welcome to connect. And if you think it's been in any way helpful, then just pop me a message if you think you could do with anything else. And I've just seen a note from Debbie in the chat. So absolutely, Debbie, I can send you through the policy. Our pack is probably a little bit specific to the life space, but I'll see what I can tease out of that for you.
Are you happy for me to circulate that to everybody who's?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I know I've sent you the trustee skills matrix, the one
Yes, you did. You sent me the policy as well.
And the policy. But yeah, I will have a look at our pack and see if I can wheedle out some of our bits. And if it's useful to you, then you're very welcome. And I'm also the Sado that can now legitimately say I have a policy schedule and all of my policies are up to date. So if anyone's looking for a policy and just wants wants a starter for 10, then reach out. If you're a charity CEO, there's a fantastic Facebook group that is small charity CEOs. If you're not a CEO, they won't let you in. But it's a really good resource. You know, you can choose to post anonymously, and some people do when they're having a tricky point, but often people just reach out. The other day, somebody reached out and said, "Does anyone know how to calculate what the new NI is going to mean for my charity?" And somebody put in an Excel sheet and said, "Here you go, I've done all the workings out." And then another one, you know, you could go in and use it. So it's really helpful. Also in Warwickshire and totally rogue, not connected to Carver, though we do like Carver. There is a charity CEO group. And occasionally we've got chairs in there as well. So um, the Friendship Project, Cheryl comes along in her role. It's kind of pseudo CEO chair. We meet once a month for breakfast, put the world to rights, hold each other's hand on a bad day, and give each other, you know, confidence and comfort. So if you're ever interested in finding out about that, then get in touch as well, or
Excellent. Great.
hunt me out and I can tell you more.
That's really, really helpful, Lisa. Thank you very much sharing that. That's really good. Certainly resonate in terms of the expectations. I think that was a really insightful comment in terms of what people are signing up for. Time commitment, clear from the beginning. You know, we'll touch on that to later in the webinar. So thank you very much for that.
No problem. Happy to help.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we'll move on. I will share the right. Can people see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Bear with me. Okay. So what I want to do, in view of Lisa's introduction to the 6 tricky trustees, what I'd want to do is break out into breakout rooms again, and I think have a discussion about how you retain trustees and keep them engaged. So you don't have your silent Sues and other tricky trustees. So have a chat about that, and if somebody can come back as a spokesman and feedback some top tips from that discussion, that would be really helpful. We've got some ideas once you come back. One of them being always put on cake for meetings. So other good insights we will come back with after we break up into groups. So bear with me. Right, okay. So let's do that. Welcome back, everybody. So bear with me a second. So just some if somebody could mute if they're typing, that would be great. Other potential ideas and tips for engagement. Certainly the NCVO survey has said probably the #1 issue relating to trustees nationally is time commitment. So and as Lisa touched on, be clear on the expectations. Perhaps have an annual calendar of trustee meetings. Only involve them when you need to. Be systematic in terms of access to papers in sufficient time. Another key issue is embed your governance structures and processes so you're not reinventing the wheel constantly. If you need any advice on governance, obviously come to Carver, but the NCVO do the governance wheel as well, which is helpful. As we touched on, good cake and refreshments, you know, make it fun, make it enjoyable to come to meetings. At a webinar I went to beginning of the week, somebody said they have a Zoom monthly chat, no particular agenda for trustees, just to build up that relationship. Obviously, as you're probably aware, better relationships you have between trustees, the better decisions you'll you will make, and better engagement as well. Think about potentially mentoring new trustees, and as Lisa has covered in her presentation, that having an active chair, I think, is really important. Having conversations over coffee with a trustee, certainly trying to appraise trustees annually. And another key thing that came out from the NCV survey was celebrate. And that, I think, comes back to that issue of making it fun. I know time is a constraint, but there were some potential tips as well. Any particularly useful tips for engaging people? Anybody would like to pass on? Just shout.
Chris, in our group, the one that did come out, and Debbie did mention it, was how she used the one-to-one process to work a situation that was difficult, and that worked. So the one-to-one worked, and they were able to create a situation where both parties were able to go forward and the organisation was able to go forward, but the one-to-ones were the key to getting that going.
Yeah, that's great. That's good insight. Any other great ideas?
Our group, Chris. So
Yeah.
we're talking though about large organisations and well-known organisations, perhaps having not an easier time, but being able to recruit and retain trustees more easily. And if your trustees have been involved for a number of years, hopefully things are going well. But it was all about inductions, proper inductions, and buddying up with an existing trustee. And just making sure that all the trustees' voices are heard, make sure that people feel that they are being listened to. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. Okay, I'm conscious of time. We are a bit strapped for time now, so we'll move on if that's okay. I'd like to introduce David Griffith, Chair of Nuneaton Arts. And David, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. If I start by giving you a bit of background, I'm currently Chair of Trustees at Nuneaton Arts. I've been Chair for a little less than a year, but I've been one of the trustees of this and its precursor charity for 15 years or so. We're an incorporated arts charity working in Nuneaton and Bedworth. We're fairly small. Our annual turnover is about 200,000. And we operate the Abbey Theatre in Nuneaton, as well as being involved in community arts projects. We are a volunteer organisation. Trustees are volunteers, the management are volunteers, and the operational roles are pretty well all unpaid. We have 2 part-time paid employees, one who works 2 days a week covering finance and admin, and the other who's recently started, who does 2 days a week in a community development role, which is funded by an external grant. So it's a time-limited one. Until 2021, we were an unincorporated charity. The trustees had very similar responsibilities, but didn't have the protections which you have as an incorporated charity. As I say, I've been one of the trustees for about 15 years. It's fair to say that trustee recruitment was extremely difficult for an unincorporated charity of our size. Very few people were prepared to take on the personal risk, if I can put it that way. Although your risk of being sued as a trustee of an unincorporated charity is relatively small, unless if you behave yourself, there is still a risk there. Whereas once you're an incorporated charity, you're like a limited liability company. It's the organisation that takes the risk rather than the individual. As far as recruitment goes, we've tried advertising for trustees, and we've also tried making personal approaches to people we think would be a good fit for our board. We struggled enormously when we were an incorporated charity. In the end, we just went down the route of saying, well, we're not having success in this, but we do have some success if with people who are already involved with us as volunteers. We have probably 40 regular volunteers doing things, particularly within the theatre, anything from backstage work to bar staff and so on. And in many ways, it's not surprising. Why would someone who doesn't have an involvement in what you're doing volunteer to become a trustee of it? There are people with completely altruistic motives, but there are not so many of them these days. One point to note, we are an association model charity. What that means is that we have a membership, and our membership's about 150, and they elect the trustees. If we have vacancies, the board can go out and look for people we can co-opt as trustees. But in the first instance, trustees are elected for 3-year terms, which can be renewed at the annual general meeting. Now that does leave you in the situation where if you've got a trustee who is who comes under one of Steve Allman's less desirable categories, you have almost no chance of removing them. You are stuck with them whether you like it or not, unless you can persuade the membership as a whole that they are not a good idea. The advantage that we do have is that our volunteers are people interested in theatre and performing arts, and what that tends to mean is it brings in people with a wide range of backgrounds. We've got trustees who are accountants, who are engineers, work in IT and telecoms. We have a retired publican and also a teacher and various other people who've all come through involvement in what we actually do. So what we've done generally, as far as recruitment goes, is we've approached volunteers who we think would be up to the job and have something to offer as trustees. It's interesting that we've ended up with a good range of business and personnel skills, but we don't generally have people with any professional arts background. I think the people who are working and earning money in the arts steer extremely clear of anything which looks like volunteer and unpaid. It's difficult enough to make a living in the arts, and if anyone's doing it, I think they just concentrate all their efforts on that. But the area we do fall down in is diversity. We have managed to recruit trustees in the 18 to 30 age group, but we are a predominantly male trustee board, and we have very poor ethnic diversity. And that reflects the people who are involved in the arts locally. And I'm really not sure, we're all being encouraged to increase the diversity on trustee boards. I'm not at all sure how one actually does that. If you don't have that as a sort of pool to pull from. If you go on to retention of trustees, we have had issues in the past. We haven't had issues in more recent years. We do try very hard to keep trustee meetings on track and to give everyone the opportunity to contribute. We send out papers for discussion a week before the meeting. We don't have all these things bounced on us as any other business and so on. So we make sure that everyone's got the chance to be properly prepared, and we try and keep the discussions to areas that the trustees should be looking at. That's probably the most difficult thing in a completely volunteer organisation, because a lot of our trustees have management or operational roles within the organisation. One of our trustees is also our unpaid finance manager. One is our buildings manager. One is health and safety, and so on. We have people in unpaid management roles who are not trustees, but the majority of the roles are in fact carried out by trustees. So if we're not careful, trustee meetings will tend to drift into the discussion of details which should be left to the individual managers. You get into the nuts and bolts of things which are not really a trustee matter. You know, whether our technical department wants another iPad or not is not really a trustee matter. We've got delegated budgets and so on, so it should be dealt with outside trustee meetings. So we have to work quite hard to keep meetings on track, because the other downside of things getting too specific in operational terms is it tends to exclude the trustees who don't have specific management responsibilities or any sort of experience in that area. And the last thing you want is to start having an altruistic discussion about computer security, and you know, and GDPR and IT and data. Three-quarters of the trustee board are just going to glaze over at that point, and because they have no idea what the two people who know what they're talking about are actually talking about. And that's probably one of the most difficult things as chair of meetings is to keep the meeting talking about what the trustees should be talking about, which is, you know, the strategy of the organisation and how we should move forward and so on. And we did, under particularly one previous chair, have enormous issues with trustee retention because the discussion drift had become the norm, and so almost every discussion came down to you know, the nuts and bolts of an add-on to the lighting desk or something like that, which is frankly not trustee business at all, and just switches a lot of people off. But certainly in terms of retention, it for us, it seems to be keep people involved, keep the discussions on the areas that the trustees should be discussing, and, as has been said, as far as possible, provide cake and try and make it fun. I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm happy to deal with questions and things as we move on.
Okay, David, thank you very much. Conscious of time, but if there's any burning questions for David? No, that was very comprehensive. Thank you very much. So if we move on, bear with me as I share again. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, bear with me. Just checking that's okay. Yep. So we've heard from two charities about their experiences in recruiting trustees. There are a lot of resources out there that you can tap into, and I've included some on this slide. There's obviously Charity Commission, finding new trustees, bit dry to be honest, but it is there. NCVO have a lot of good information. If you're not members, well, then I would recommend becoming them. I think depending on your size, it could be free of charge. And then there's the Getting on Board, which was an excellent charity. Unfortunately, they've had to cease, but all their resources are still on their website, and they do an excellent report, how to recruit trustees for your charity. So there's lots of links there. And also the trustee recruitment cycle from Reach Volunteering, which is an excellent resource as well. A lot of these resources are advocates for an open recruitment process. And that's what we're going to look at now. Not to say that should be the definitive route for everybody. In our survey before, 14 people who'd booked on said no, they didn't openly advertise trustee posts, and 13 said yes, so they did. So an even split there. But we're going to have a look at that and explore some tips and backgrounds to a recruitment process, if that's okay. So what we're basing this on is the trustee recruitment cycle that's on Reach Volunteering, a really useful resource of a step-by-step process of recruiting trustees. Some of the tips are useful even if you don't go down an open recruitment process. The first stage they talk about is take some time to reflect. Is this the right time to recruit trustees? An example I heard recently is a charity where there was tension and conflict within the trustee board. And I think on reflection, they felt initially they felt we need to recruit new trustees to try and move this on. But I think once they reflected, they realised they needed to resolve the issue first before they did the recruitment. So that's an example of, reflecting, is this the right time? Obviously, if people coming up to retirement or no longer available, then that's a different issue. I think a key issue to reflect on as well is, how is your charity perceived? Have you got a good reputation? Is your website up to date? Are you in the paper? How is your profile? I think these are really important things to increase your chances of people, applying or becoming available to become trustees. Obviously, open recruitment, we've talked about, brings many benefits and can be done alongside other forms like word of mouth and networking. But it's an excellent way of filling skills and experiences that you need. On that, certainly a recommendation, and we've touched on this, Lisa touched on this, is have a board exercise, perhaps identifying. I thought that was really good in terms of Lisa was saying she has one-to-ones where, what do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? What is your motivation, and what do you see the charity doing in 5 years? So, and in that, you can start to identify what skills you do need, or do a more systematic skills audit, and we'll send out a spreadsheet of that. So you know what the gaps are that you need to try and fill to make governance and the charity more effective ultimately. David's touched on diversity. Certainly the research is showing that actually charities with a diverse trustee board, perhaps in terms of age, young people, ethnicity, a whole variety of areas of diversity, ultimately can make better decisions and be more effective. They're getting a broader perspective to any issues or problems that may occur. And certainly, as we touched on, lived experience, I think, you can't Google it. It is really valuable in terms of having somebody or people on the trustee board with that lived experience for your cause. Also be aware, can you actually buy in skills? A lot of charities want perhaps a legal expert, but how many times are you actually going to come across a legal issue? Is it better to actually buy in in inverted commas, perhaps through some pro bono support, some legal advice when you need it. So be open, not necessarily to be narrow focused in terms of, we need an accountant, we need a solicitor, etc., on the board. Think about actually, can you buy in some of that expertise? And as we touched on, lived experience, so valuable for particular causes. Moving on. The next section, we'll skip over skills, is preparing. Lisa mentioned a job pack. We can send out some examples of those. Very much important to do a role description, person specification, perhaps based on what skills you need. An advert, background on your charity, really selling that charity. So you've got a resource here or a pack that you can informally give out to people, as well as doing an open recruitment process. It really shows that your charity in a professional way. I've seen some glossy versions and some less glossy versions, but I think is a fantastic resource. In that, and we've touched on this a couple of times, being clear on expectations. What are the expectations in terms of time and commitment before people engage in the recruitment process? And trustee recruitment is always a two-way process. It's not always about recruiting. Trustees will make their own decision as well. So it's got to be a two-way process in that respect. Moving on, the third stage in the trustee recruitment cycle is about advertising. What I'd now like to do is pass on to Karen, and she's going to go through how Carver can help and some of the areas you can advertise your trustee opportunities on. Karen?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to keep this very brief because I know that we are getting short of time. So the best way that I would be able to help people is with the registering on Simply Connect. So a lot of you may know about Carver's Simply Connect portal, and this is a free to access portal for anybody who's looking for volunteering, to look for roles on there, and for voluntary organisations to post volunteer roles, including trustee roles, and recruit, hopefully, suitable people. And it's an automated matching service that links people to organisations based on their skills and interests. So if somebody says they've got really good IT skills on their profile, on their volunteer profile, or they say that they've got a legal background, it will link up with any adverts or any posts that have been put on from organisations that highlight these as skills that are needed. So, it is quite a good way of matching volunteers with the roles that are needed. So this is the front screen. I can't go through all the how to get on it, but we have got some really simple guidance on how to get logged on. And if your organisation is already registered, it's easy to add yourself as a user. So you don't have to start all over again. You can just add yourself as somebody else who uses the profile for that organisation. So if we can have the next one, Chris, please. So to add yourself to an organisation, this is the link. So if you can click on this, it'll show you a drop-down field with organisations, and you can see if your organisation is listed already. If it is, you can link yourself, as I've said, as a user for that organisation. If you're not registered as an organisation, you will have to put the profile on there yourself. But then after that, everybody else in the organisation can link themselves as well. So when you either add yourself as a user or you add a new profile, it will show as pending approval until it's approved by either myself or one of my colleagues, depending on which area of Warwickshire you're in. But that shouldn't take very long. So once you've been approved, you can then go on and use the profile as you wish to. And when it's been approved, you'll be notified by email. Okay. any problems with any of the Simply Connect stuff, get in touch with myself for Stratford or one of my colleagues in the rest of Warwickshire. We're here to help, so we can sit down with you and go through it if there are any problems, and we can send out guidance on how to do all the different things. So next slide, please, Chris. So this is just an example that I've pulled off of a trustee role that's on there. So you can put on anything that you want. So this organisation has put this format. So what's needed from the trustee, what you'll be doing in the role as a trustee, the skills needed, and then what's in it for a trustee, for a volunteer that comes forward to be a trustee. So my advice would be to make it as interesting as possible. Keep it short, make it really, really clear. You can't put everything on there, or it's very difficult to put everything on. So put on the key points, what's important in the role, and then maybe offer an informal chat or that somebody can email so that they can find out more about the role without actually any obligation. So it is about that good fit, isn't it? So they need to make sure that it's the right role for them as a trustee, and you as an organisation need to make sure that they are the right person for your organisation. So it's very much about that communication and finding out if they are the right person or not. And if they're not, as Lisa said, you know, perhaps moving them on. You can do the introductory thing where they come along to the meetings, but you've not committed on either side at that point. Okay, so next slide, please. So again, places to advertise trustee roles. So from our point of view as Carver, the Simply Connect portal, anybody looking for a role can go on there and they can see everything that's on there. You can register and post volunteer roles, including trustee roles for free on the charityjob.co.uk website. So that's the link there. Reach volunteering, you can put trustee roles on there. For volunteers, I believe it doesn't cost, but for trustee roles, I believe there is a cost, and that tells you on that link what they do charge. And then trusteesunlimited.co.uk, it's free for charities with less than £1 million turnover, if they're NCVO members. Okay, so the next one, please, Chris. So specific types of trustees, I've just highlighted some websites here for young trustees, treasurer roles, and women. So again, you can look on those, see if they're of use to you, and you know, just use whatever is going to be useful for your organisation. So next slide, Chris.
Next slide's mine, I think.
Oh, sorry, that's mine.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the last point.
That's excellent, Karen. Anything else?
I was just going to say, just the last point. So lots of people that look, particularly on the Carver portal, they're looking for volunteer roles and they may not have thought about being a trustee, or they may think that they don't have the skills and experience. But with the skills matching, hopefully it will flag up trustee roles for people as well, and then they might think about being a trustee rather than just a general volunteer. Thanks, Chris.
That's great, thank you. Just on the advertising and I suppose networking, you know, it might be useful to think out the proverbial box in terms of what networks can you go to perhaps a business breakfast or a chamber of commerce event, or link in with, you know, a local accountancy network. I'm sure they're fun, in terms of you know, trying to think where those people might, you know, where are they communicated with those skills and those other things. In the NCBO survey, the number one skill or role that was desired by charities was and there was a gap in, was marketing and comms. That was for small and medium charities. So, you know, where do those people kind of, how do you communicate with those people? You know, by all means, use your own network. And obviously a lot of them you do, but I think there's the difficulty there is that you're always speaking to the same people. You know, you're not getting a different perspective, perhaps. And you know, that's really valuable to get a different perspective. So some of the problems perhaps that, you know, can easily go round and round in a charity board, getting a different perspective. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on. So what is the final stages? Stage 4, 5 and 6 are really stages that you're probably well aware of in terms of, you know, in terms of recruitment. So that's kind of shortlisting, appointing and inducting. Obviously, induction is hugely important in terms of retention, and then evaluating that process. So we're not going to go through those specifically because most people have probably been interviewed or gone through that process in the work situation. And I suppose that does lead on to the view is, you know, if you're reluctant to open advertise, you know, if you did have paid staff, you know, 99% of the time you would openly advertise. So why not for trustees? So I think it has so many positives. Now you may feel quite rightly, I just don't have enough time. But the reverse of that is this potentially will give you a more effective board, a greater impact on the beneficiaries, and actually save you time at a later date because you're running around having to fill this gap in the charity and the structure. So that going through that cycle, you know, is initially an investment of time, but it ultimately will save you time. So that I think is a key message that comes through the trustee recruitment cycle and the organisations that we've touched on. And we touched on before, research shows that a diverse board makes better rounded decisions and has more creativity. That diversity of views, diversity of people. There's a whole raft of additional information about recruiting for diversity. We're just touching on it today. We couldn't do it justice by going through it's a topic on itself really, but there's lots of stuff out there to try and help you do that. That's out there, and we signpost too as well. So moving on is just final reflections really, oh, we've got some people still. You don't see people when you're doing in presenter mode. So any final questions, any final thoughts?
I've just put in the chat, Chris, about how we can promote roles for organisations. So I'd send them direct to us or have a look on the Carver website, and we can put things in newsletters, talk to people individually.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that we said we will send out all information and some additional information as well. There's lots of good information on the board, the website there. Thoroughly recommend it. They've got templates, even email letters to confirm to people if they're successful in terms of being a trustee. Lots of information that can be adapted for your charity. Anything final, Karen? Any final thoughts?
No, I think you've covered pretty much everything, and thanks to the two speakers as well. Again, different views, but very useful. Yeah,
thank you, David and Lisa, and above all, thank you, trustees, and those who support trustees. You know, you do an invaluable job, and it's much appreciated. And thank you for the causes that you support and the beneficiaries that you support. So I think that's a key message in Trustee Week. there's additional information on Trustee Week website about additional courses and other things. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.